An Apache woman was left to die. The rancher who saved her changed history forever. Caleb Stone lived a quiet life on the edge of the desert. The rugged, barren land was unforgiving, yet he had grown used to its silence, its stillness. His ranch was isolated, far from the nearest town, and he liked it that way. Most days he worked alone, fixing fences, tending to the cattle, and making sure his homestead stayed intact. Life had always been about routine for Caleb, until that day. The sun was high when Caleb rode out to check on the herd of wild horses that had been grazing near the eastern ridge. The heat was intense, and the land shimmered in the distance, as if the earth itself was bending. Caleb wiped his brow with the back of his hand and spurred his horse forward. His mind focused on the task at hand. He didn't notice the small figure lying in the sand until he was nearly upon it. At first, he thought it was just another desert illusion, one of the many tricks the heat played on the eyes. But as he drew closer, the figure took shape. A woman. She was lying half-buried in the sand, her body barely visible except for a hand that reached out, fingers stiff and pale. Caleb's heart skipped a beat. He quickly dismounted, his boots sinking into the sand as he knelt beside her. The woman's face was sunburned, her skin scorched by the harsh desert sun. She was breathing, but barely. Her pulse was weak, and there was blood smeared on her clothes. Caleb's instincts kicked in. He needed to get her out of the sun and back to the ranch. He scooped her into his arms and swung her over his shoulder, her body limp and light. As he climbed back onto his horse, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke. Something wasn't right. Caleb scanned the horizon, but there was nothing there. Just the endless stretch of desert. He spurred his horse forward, trying to get back to safety as quickly as possible. The woman didn't stir as Caleb rode, her head resting against his chest. He felt a strange sense of urgency, like something was pushing him to hurry. His ranch was still a few miles away, and every second mattered. As they neared the edge of the desert, a sound reached Caleb's ears. Distant, but unmistakable. The whir of engines. He turned his head, searching the sky, and that's when he saw them. 3 ships, sleek and fast, cutting through the air toward him. They were unlike anything Caleb had ever seen. Dark, angular, with glowing lights along their edges. His heart raced. Who were these people? What did they want? He urged his horse forward, desperate to reach the ranch before they arrived. But the ships were too fast. They closed in quickly, and Caleb could hear their engines roaring as they descended. He rode as fast as he could, but the ships were already overhead, their shadow sweeping across the land. Before Caleb could react, a beam of light shot out from the lead ship, hitting the ground just in front of him. His horse reared in terror, and Caleb barely managed to hold on as it bucked and twisted. He fought to regain control, but the horse was too spooked. With a final jerk, the horse broke free, running wild across the desert. Caleb, thrown from the saddle, landed hard on the ground. He scrambled to his feet, pain shooting through his leg, but he didn't stop. He had to get back to the woman. He looked back toward where he had left her, but she was gone. The ship's lights swept over the sand, and Caleb saw the woman being lifted off the ground by some unseen force. She was being pulled toward one of the ships, and Caleb's blood ran cold. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the ship, adrenaline flooding his veins. He didn't know what he was up against, but he couldn't let them take her. He wasn't sure why, but he knew she needed him. As he reached the spot where she had been, a powerful force knocked him off his feet. He slammed into the sand, breath knocked out of him. A figure stood above him, tall and armored, its face hidden behind a helmet. The figure spoke in a language Caleb didn't understand, its voice low and mechanical. Caleb tried to move, but the air felt thick, as if something was pressing down on him. He struggled against the weight, but it was no use. The figure raised a hand, and Caleb felt his body go still. The woman was now hovering above the ground, a soft blue glow surrounding her. Caleb reached out, desperate to do something, anything, but the figure held him in place, its power overwhelming. Just as Caleb thought he would lose consciousness, the woman's body suddenly dropped, falling back to the sand with a thud. The figure turned its attention to her, but Caleb wasn't about to let this happen. He pushed through the pain and forced himself to his feet. In a moment of clarity, Caleb grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it at the figure. The rock struck the helmet, causing the figure to stagger back in surprise. The alien soldier raised its weapon, but Caleb was already charging, a roar of fury escaping his lips. He tackled the figure, knocking it to the ground. For a moment there was a struggle, the alien soldier's limbs thrashing as Caleb fought to disarm it. His hands were shaking, his heart racing, but he didn't stop. He had to protect her. With a final push, Caleb ripped the weapon from the soldier's hand and pressed it to the ground. The soldier let out a strangled cry, its body twitching in a last attempt to fight back, but it was no use. Caleb stood over the soldier, panting heavily, blood and sweat streaking his face. The ship above them whined, and the other soldiers began to retreat. But Caleb didn't move. He knelt beside the woman, her body lying motionless in the sand. She was breathing, but barely. Caleb reached down, his hands gentle as he lifted her back into his arms. He didn't know what was going on, who these people were, or why they were after her. But he wasn't going to let them take her, not while he had breath in his body. Caleb Stone rode hard, the woman still unconscious in his arms. His heart hammered in his chest as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert. He had fought to protect her, but now all he could do was pray that he hadn't made a terrible mistake. What had happened? Who were those soldiers, and why were they after her? His horse galloped at full speed, his grip tight on the reins as the ranch came into view. The ranch was his home, his sanctuary. Caleb had never expected it to be the battleground of some kind of war, least of all one that involved alien forces. But now, with the strange woman in his care, he couldn't ignore the truth. His life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. By the time he reached the ranch, the night sky had fallen and the air had cooled. Caleb led the horse to the barn and quickly dismounted, his legs stiff from the ride. He gently lifted the woman from the saddle and carried her inside, making sure no one had followed him. The place felt oddly quiet, as if the whole world had paused. Caleb laid her on the old wooden table, his hands shaking slightly as he removed her dusty cloak. Her skin, now visible, was dotted with bruises and cuts, and the strange symbols Caleb had noticed before were still faintly glowing beneath her skin. He didn't understand what they meant, but something in his gut told him they weren't ordinary markings. After a few minutes, the woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered and her breath quickened. Caleb stepped back, watching her carefully, unsure of what to do next. When her eyes finally opened, she blinked several times, as though trying to make sense of her surroundings. Where am I? Her voice was soft, hoarse, but filled with confusion. You're safe, Caleb said gently. You're at my ranch. You were unconscious when I found you in the desert. The woman's eyes darted around the room, taking in her new surroundings, before settling on Caleb. There was a flicker of recognition in her gaze. Her brow furrowed as she tried to speak, but the words didn't come. My name is Caleb, he said, trying to offer her some comfort. I found you out in the desert. You were hurt. You've been through a lot. She swallowed hard, then nodded slowly, though she didn't speak. Her gaze dropped to her hands, which were trembling slightly. Caleb could see that she was trying to gather her thoughts, struggling with memories that seemed to elude her. Finally, she spoke again, but her voice was filled with uncertainty. Antea, she said quietly, I'm not supposed to be here. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Not supposed to be here? What do you mean? Taya closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering the strength to explain. I was sent on a mission, she began, her voice growing steadier. A mission to protect something, but it's gone wrong. Caleb took a step closer, his curiosity piqued. Protect what? What are you talking about? Taya met his gaze, her eyes filled with a strange intensity. I protect the artifact, she said, almost in a whisper. The one they want, the one they'll kill for. Caleb's mind raced. Artifact? Who wants it? And who are they? Taya swallowed again, her hands clenched into fists as though trying to hold on to something she couldn't let go of. The invaders, she said, her voice barely audible. They came from the stars. I've been running from them for years. My people were the guardians of the artifact. But they're gone. And now it's just me. Caleb felt his heart tighten in his chest. He didn't understand everything Taya was saying, but it was clear she was in trouble. Big trouble. You're talking about alien invaders? Caleb asked, his voice edged with disbelief. And some kind of artifact? Why didn't you tell me this earlier? I couldn't, she replied, her voice strained. I couldn't risk it. I had to keep it a secret, even from myself. I didn't know you. I didn't know if I could trust you. Caleb stood still for a moment, processing her words. Alien invaders. An artifact. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, not the kind of thing that happened in real life. But as he looked at Taya, with her wild eyes and the strange symbols on her skin, he couldn't deny it anymore. This wasn't some fantasy. It was real. All right, Caleb said, trying to steady his breath. So, what happens now? They'll come for me again. They won't stop. And this time they'll do anything to get what they want. Before Caleb could respond, the sound of engines echoed from the distance. His head snapped toward the window, and his heart skipped a beat. The same unmistakable whirring sound. The ships. We don't have much time, Taya said, her voice now filled with urgency. They're already here. Caleb turned to face her. We have to get out of here. I'll fight them, Taya said, rising unsteadily to her feet. I'm trained for this. Caleb grabbed her arm before she could move. You're hurt. You need to rest. Taya shook her head, her face set with determination. I can't. They'll kill us both if we don't stop them. We have to fight. Caleb hesitated for a moment, but he could see the fire in her eyes. He knew she wasn't going to back down, and deep down, he realized she was right. They had no choice. The battle was coming. Caleb reached for his rifle, which was resting against the wall. He had never been much of a fighter, but this was different. His ranch, his life, and now the life of this woman were all at stake. He was going to protect her, no matter the cost. Together, Caleb and Taya moved quickly, preparing the ranch for whatever was coming. The wind howled outside as the first of the enemy ships neared. Caleb's pulse quickened, his hands steady despite the growing sense of dread. They were no longer just survivors of the desert. They were the last line of defense, and if they didn't stop the invaders, the world as they knew it would change forever. The night was still. The only sounds were the faint rustle of wind through the dry desert grass and the distant hum of the enemy ships as they drew closer. Caleb and Taya stood side by side, looking out across the ranch from the safety of the barn. Taya's eyes were locked on the sky, her face tense, while Caleb gripped his rifle tightly, the cold steel offering him little comfort. We don't have much time, Taya whispered, her voice low but filled with urgency. They'll land soon. When they do, they'll come for us first. We need to be ready. Caleb nodded, but his mind was racing. He had never faced anything like this before. Aliens, advanced technology, and a battle for something far greater than he could understand. But Taya was right. There was no turning back now. We can't let them take the artifact, Taya continued, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. I've protected it my whole life. I can't let them have it now, not after everything my people sacrificed. Caleb looked at her, his brow furrowing. The artifact, it's important, isn't it? Yes, it's the key to everything. It's what they want to control. Whoever holds the artifact can control time itself. They can change history, rewrite everything. If they get it, they'll conquer the entire galaxy.
A chill ran down Caleb's spine. This wasn't just about survival.
It was about the fate of the entire world. He didn't fully understand how or why Taya was chosen to protect this artifact, but he could see the weight it had on her. She was not just a woman fighting for her life. She was a guardian of something much more powerful, and now it was up to them to stop the invaders. We can't let that happen, Caleb said firmly, his voice resolute. Taya nodded, her eyes filled with determination. We won't. The first ship landed just outside the ranch, its massive form blocking out the stars as it hovered just above the ground. Caleb's heart pounded in his chest, and he could feel the ground tremble as the ship settled into place. A few moments later, the ship's hatch opened with a hiss, and several figures stepped out. They were tall, armored figures, their faces hidden behind dark helmets. The soldiers moved with precision, scanning their surroundings as they advanced toward the barn. Taya pulled Caleb into the shadows, her body tense. Stay quiet, she whispered. We'll take them by surprise. He had never been in a fight like this, and though he was determined to protect Taya, he felt out of his depth. But there was no time for doubt. These soldiers were here to take her, to take the artifact, and he would do whatever it took to stop them. Taya moved like a shadow, slipping into the darkness and disappearing from Caleb's view. He heard the faint sound of footsteps behind him and quickly turned, his rifle raised. But it was Taya, her face illuminated by the dim light, her eyes focused and calm. I'll take the one on the left, she said, her voice low. You take the one on the right. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, but there was no turning back. They had to fight. There was too much at stake. The first soldier passed, and Caleb's pulse quickened. He took a deep breath, then lunged forward, catching the soldier off guard. The soldier's armor was heavy, but Caleb was faster, using his strength to bring the enemy to the ground. The soldier struggled, but Caleb pressed his knee into its back, keeping it pinned to the earth. Taya's fight was over quickly. With a swift move, she disabled the other soldier, knocking him unconscious with a well-placed strike to the head. Caleb breathed a sigh of relief. though his heart still raced. They had to be quick. There are more soldiers coming. Taya motioned for Caleb to follow, and they moved swiftly through the shadows, avoiding the patrolling soldiers. They made their way toward the edge of the ranch, where a small cliff overlooked the desert. Taya's eyes scanned the horizon, and she pulled Caleb to a stop. "They're coming," she said, her voice tight. "More ships. We need to get to the artifact before they do." Caleb glanced at her, then at the ships in the distance. "Where is it? How do we get to it?" Taya didn't hesitate. "Follow me," she said, and without another word she turned and led the way toward the cliffside. They climbed quickly, moving with purpose. Caleb's legs burned as they reached the top, and he looked out across the desert, where the lights of the ships were growing brighter. At the top of the cliff, hidden in a cave, was the artifact. Caleb's breath caught in his throat when he saw it. It wasn't anything like he had expected. It was a simple stone, but it pulsed with an otherworldly glow, its surface covered in intricate symbols that seemed to move, shifting as if alive. "This is it," Taya said, her voice filled with awe. "The artifact. We have to protect it." Caleb stepped closer, his hand hovering above the stone. He could feel the energy emanating from it, an intense, almost magnetic pull. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Taya's eyes were filled with fear and resolve. "We can't let them take it. We need to hide it, destroy it if necessary. We can't risk it falling into their hands." Before Caleb could respond, the sound of more engines filled the air. The soldiers were getting closer. Taya reached out, grabbing the artifact and holding it tightly in her hands. "We have to move," she said. "We can't let them find us here. It's our only chance." Caleb looked at her, then at the glowing stone. He didn't fully understand its power, but he knew one thing. They had to keep it out of enemy hands. They turned and fled, but as they ran, the ground trembled beneath them. Caleb's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the sound of approaching footsteps. They were surrounded. Caleb and Taya sprinted through the desert, the cold night air biting at their skin. Their breaths came fast, ragged, as they ran towards the only place they knew they could make a stand, the old barn near the ranch. The artifact pulsed in Taya's hands, its glow brighter than ever, as if it sensed the danger closing in. Behind them, the sound of engines roared through the night. The invaders had found them, and there was no escaping now. The soldiers were closing in fast, their heavy footsteps echoing on the desert floor. Caleb's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline rushing through his veins. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. There was no more time to hide. It was now or never. "We have to stop them," Taya said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We have to use the artifact." Caleb's gaze flicked to the glowing stone in her hands. He had no idea what it could do, but Taya seemed certain that it was their only chance. "What do we do with it?" he asked, his voice tight with fear. Taya looked up at him, her eyes full of resolve. "We use its power. We have to activate it, change the course of everything before they can get their hands on it." Before Caleb could ask any more questions, the first of the soldiers appeared in the distance, their armor gleaming under the stars. They were coming fast, and Caleb could hear the faint hiss of their weapons charging. They were ready for a fight, and Caleb knew that they were outmatched. The soldiers had superior technology, advanced weapons, and training. But Caleb had something they didn't, a reason to fight. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore, he was fighting for the future of humanity. Taya's voice broke through his thoughts. "We have to hurry. If we don't act fast, everything will be lost." Without another word, Caleb sprinted towards the barn, his eyes locked on the entrance. Taya followed closely behind, her grip tightening around the artifact. The soldiers were getting closer, their footsteps pounding like thunder in the distance. Caleb reached the barn first, slamming the door behind him as Taya caught up. They were inside, but it wouldn't be long before the soldiers reached them. Taya dropped to her knees, placing the artifact on the ground before her. She closed her eyes, her hands trembling as she pressed her palms against the stone. Caleb stood by the door, rifle in hand, his eyes scanning the shadows. He knew that the soldiers would be on them any second. They didn't have much time. "Caleb," Taya said, her voice soft but filled with determination. "You have to protect me. I have to focus. If I'm distracted, it won't work." Caleb nodded without hesitation. He couldn't let anything happen to her. She was their only hope. He moved to the window, peering through the crack between the wooden planks. He could see the figures of the soldiers in the distance, their weapons raised and ready. They were closing in fast. Suddenly the barn door slammed open. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the moonlight. Caleb's heart skipped a beat. It was one of the soldiers. "Stay away from her," Caleb growled, raising his rifle. But the soldier didn't move. Instead, he spoke in a low, mechanical voice. "You cannot stop us," the soldier said. "The artifact belongs to us. Surrender it, and you will be spared." Caleb's grip tightened on the rifle, his finger brushing the trigger. He wasn't going to let him take her. He wasn't going to let him take the artifact. Not without a fight. But before he could pull the trigger, Taya's voice rang out from behind him. "Caleb, don't. I've got this." The soldier's helmet turned towards her, and Caleb heard a strange, almost mechanical, clicking sound coming from it. The soldier seemed to hesitate, as if something was stopping him from advancing. Taya stood, her body trembling, but her eyes locked on the soldier. The artifact in her hands glowed brighter, its pulse quickening as if responding to her call. Slowly, she raised it toward the soldier. "We don't have time for this," Taya said, her voice firm. "This ends now." With a sudden flash of light, the soldier was blasted back, his body thrown to the ground as though struck by an invisible force. Caleb watched in awe as the soldier's armor began to disintegrate, the glow from the artifact growing brighter with every passing second. The power that radiated from it was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was as if the very fabric of time itself was shifting, bending to Taya's will. Taya's breath came in ragged gasps, but she didn't stop. She wasn't done yet. The soldiers outside were still advancing, but now they hesitated. Caleb could see their confusion, their uncertainty. They weren't sure what was happening, but they could feel the power of the artifact. They knew they were up against something far greater than they had anticipated. "Caleb," Taya said, her voice strained but steady. "It's time. Help me activate it. Together." Caleb ran to her side, his mind racing. He didn't fully understand what Taya was doing, but he knew one thing. They couldn't let the soldiers take the artifact. They couldn't let them change history. Together, they placed their hands on the artifact. The glow from the stone intensified, and the barn seemed to vibrate with the energy that pulsed through it. Caleb felt a strange sensation wash over him, a feeling of weightlessness, as if time itself was bending around them. Suddenly, the world around them began to blur, the air thickening as if reality itself was unraveling. Caleb's head spun, and he felt like he was being pulled in every direction at once. The soldiers outside were no longer visible, their figures fading away as though they were being erased from existence. "Hold on," Taya whispered. "We're resetting it. We're changing it." The light from the artifact exploded, blinding Caleb for a moment. When his vision cleared, he saw nothing but the empty desert stretching out before him. The barn was gone. The soldiers were gone, the ranch, everything had vanished. Aya collapsed beside him, breathing heavily, her eyes wide with exhaustion. Caleb knelt beside her, unsure of what had just happened. What did we do?" Caleb asked, his voice hoarse with confusion. Taya looked at him, her eyes filled with both fear and relief. "We've reset it," she said softly. "We changed history. We stopped them." Caleb didn't fully understand what had just occurred, but one thing was clear. They had stopped the invasion. The artifact had been protected, and the timeline had been altered. The soldiers were no longer a threat. Taya smiled weakly, her body still trembling. "It's over," she whispered. "We saved the world." But as Caleb looked out into the now peaceful desert, he couldn't help but wonder, what price had they paid for altering time? What would the future hold now that history had been changed?